Oh, look at this.
Behind the scenes version, we got it up here, man. On the screen,
Magnet of
man.
Masculinity on KLDC.
Sad.
Behind the scenes version.
Hey,
Ooh, what?
did you know that I am Kirk M. Samuels?
Did you know that I am Jason B. Kendrick?
And we are the Magnet of Masculinity.
That's right. We are just real men having real conversations for you.
For you.
On your home for healthy
I'm
masculinity.
giving a little point to the screen.
Little point.
Yeah. That was total. I just interrupted you, man.
That's all right. I interrupt you. That's what we do.
Right, man.
We just interrupt each other.
Hey, man, this is your home. We have some real talk, man. I love this, man. I love just having these conversations, man. This is good stuff.
This is the kind of thing I think in honor of the recent, semi-recent Father's Day thing that happened recently, which did you know that Father's Day is the 18th celebrated holiday in the U.S.? There's like Christmas, and I think Mother's Day is like 4th. I mean, we're behind Columbus Day and Arbor Day.
Wow. Trees and the dude that got lost.
Yeah. I mean,
which is kind of synonymous.
That's probably a discussion for another time, but I just thought that was interesting.
We just had Father's Day, man. We just had Father's Day, and as we record this anyway, we just had Father's Day. But you know, man, on Mad Men of Masculinity, every day is Father's Day.
That's right.
You know what I'm saying? So it don't matter when you listen to this. Every day is Father's Day.
It's all about us men.
Today is Father's Day. Yesterday was Father's Day.
Yes.
You know
every day you get up as a dad, it's Father's Day.
Or if you have a dad,
yeah,
you know.
That's true. That's true. I know when I first started talking about the father-son wound and wanting to heal that, people were like, "Are you a father?" I was like, and I used to get offended. I'm like, "No, I'm a son."
Yeah.
I mean, I'm part of that equation. And getting older now, it's like, well, hey, about father time. That's kind of funny, father time.
About father time. You know, so are we talking about a father wound? Are we talking about father wounds today?
We are bringing up father wound.
Yeah. This is deep stuff, man. This is deep stuff. My theory is that pretty much every man, way more than 51 out of 100, every man has one of 4 father wounds.
Yeah.
Either the father was absent from the home, that father was absent in the home, the father was abusive, or the father set such a high bar that the son could never satisfy him or make him happy or make him proud.
Yeah, I've heard it's about 90%. About 90% of men have.
You think 90?
About 90% of men have. I mean, you figure of all those different 4 categories, that pretty much covers the range, the biggest range. And so you're talking about maybe 10% of men had a father who was in the home, who didn't set a high example, who wasn't absentee and wasn't abusive. I mean, it's pretty low example.
Of all the men that you've met, I mean, like, just your subset of men that you've met. I mean, from the time you were, let's say, even boys and men, boys, 2 men. I mean, but of all the males that you've met over the course of your life, what would you say the percentage would be? I mean, of males that you've obviously gotten to know a little bit, what would you say the percentage is of males that would fall into one of those 4 categories?
Probably 90 or more percent of the guys I know that have met or that I've worked with. I mean, it's a pretty high percentage, and I think for most of us, it is maybe a lack of awareness or just lack of knowing that. I know when I was coming up and growing up, I didn't realize that there was any trauma. I didn't realize that there was any neglect. This was just how I grew up. This is just how Dad was. And it wasn't until later on, as I struggled in my relationships and started going through counseling and therapy and reading and doing all the different personal development, that was like, oh, okay, so that's what that is. And so I think for a lot of us, the ones that are friends and the other men we know, we may not even know, or they might not, unless they're doing the work. You know, maybe the B-Man guys and a lot of people we work with, they know because they're doing personal development. So they've actually delved into it instead of just going, well, that's just how Dad was. So, you know, I'm okay. But then if you don't do the work, you just pass that on, passing it down.
And I think the older you get, the more you realize that you fall into one of those categories. Oh, yeah. I think sometimes when you're young, you try to compensate, you try to make excuses. You know, maybe you say, you know, well, you know, I know he did what he meant to, whatever. Yeah. So I think the younger you are, when you're a younger male, I think it's easier to make a lot of excuses. I think a lot of us, the older we get, the more we kind of settle into kind of the reality. Like once we become men, you get into your 30s, 20s, 30s, definitely in like 40s. And I think, most of us can look back and be like, yeah, homie had some issues.
Yeah, I think that's a great point because it took a while. I think it comes from that awareness and acceptance piece. It took a long while for me, one, to admit that there was trauma. Number two, to say, because I didn't want to demonize or talk bad about my dad or either of my parents for that matter. But since we're focusing on fathers on this episode, I didn't want to demonize him or talk about him. I wanted to have a better relationship with him. Though it wasn't until acknowledging that, hey, he did the best he could. And even though the best he could wasn't the greatest, I still have to acknowledge that I had trauma, that I had some effect from how he was.
I wonder if we go through a phase when we're young, of seeing him through everything we wish he was. Mm-hmm. And then maybe we go through a phase where then it's easy to blame him for everything he wasn't.
Yeah.
And then we get into maybe what is more of an enlightened phase finally, where there's the acceptance of who he was and who he wasn't and who he wished he would have been, and maybe even why he was the way he was.
Yeah. And I think there might even be a fourth phase where you go through those three phases and get to the phase of, now I understand and I have some acceptance, and now I don't necessarily want him to be any different than the way he was. Because if he had been different, I wouldn't be me now. I would not be here doing this with you or having this purpose that I have. So I think you're dead on, because I remember thinking he was the best and there was nothing wrong, and then getting into my 20s and thinking he was the worst and there was nothing he could do right, that it was all his fault. And then getting into more of, well, no, he did the best he could, and he's just a person growing and learning as he's growing and learning. And now I'm getting to a place. I think that's why I wanted to do this one again, because we have done this before on the podcast, that this is something as men, when you go through these phases, you really start to find your purpose and your self-awareness and self-love that leads down this path of healing the father wound. And as you heal it, you don't feel as much resistance or don't feel as much pain or trauma anymore related to your father, because you've done the work. And that's kind of where I'm at. I'm starting to feel now. I'm like, oh, I don't blame him anymore. I think he was perfect for exactly who I have turned out to be, basically.
But there's a fine line in that, in terms of, healing versus numbing, because you can be healed and feel that way. You could also be numb it, the feeling, and it kind of almost in denial, maybe, where you just turn off the feelings. You just like, I don't care, or just whatever. But there's a fine line in all that, and I think ultimately it plays out. I think we see that. I think we're seeing it in our young men, specifically today. Just kind of the lack of those things, and maybe those of us that went through this last generation of to some degree absentee fatherhood or whatever, maybe it's up to us to just kind of be real with the next generation, and come with our scars. Be like, hey man, hopefully in the long run, just being here is enough, and just revealing, like, here's the scars that I went through, man, even with my father, and explaining those kinds of things. But I think in our young men today, I think there's a lashing out that's happening in this next generation, a lashing out in terms of the violence and in terms of just the bitterness and animosity. And I don't completely buy into the red pill kind of world of community, because I think when you go down those rabbit holes, and I think a lot of young men are, when you go down those rabbit holes, it's really easy to just become bitter about women because maybe we haven't had success with women. And so, man, I think that it can just be a dangerous place to go. But I think our young men, man, I think they're kind of out there lost and drifting. And while we are trying to do our work as this generation of men, I think it's incumbent upon us to make sure we reach back a little bit, at least with this next generation, and just kind of reach out to them and try to connect to them and just try to show them something better than nothing.
Yeah, I think the doing the work and being aware of your own upbringing and what you dealt with, and then being transparent about that. I know in my own experience, there was a lot of, well, I think my dad said once when I was in my 20s, if you want to blame me for your life, well, that's fine, whatever, but it's not going to do you any good or something to that effect. So,
Which is true.
But then there was no, it wasn't until later on that he's like, I may not have been the best, or, I did the best I could kind of thing. So there wasn't any accountability on his side. So from that lesson, it's like, I need to be accountable as a man to the younger generation and say, hey, number one, I'm just a man. I'm just human. I'm doing this. I'm further along the path than you, so I can help you avoid potholes and trips and things like that, and canyons you might fall into. So I can guide you that way, but I'm still just a dude like you. I still feel like I'm 18 in a 46-year-old body. That's just the way the world goes. So I can help you out, but I don't think I can be as great an influence to the younger generation without being authentic and showing and talking about those things in an authentic and honest way, and not just shoving it under the rug like, oh, it's all fine. We don't talk about that. It's okay.
Yeah, and then to be able to offer that in terms of just like, hey, if nothing else, I'm here. But to recognize, if nothing else, to recognize that yes, I have a father wound. Guess what, son? Son, literally or metaphorically, speaking, even if you're a tribal father, you're talking to a tribal son, or just a young man in your sphere of influence kind of thing. Like, hey, man, here's what I have to offer, even in my brokenness. Because I think even in our brokenness, we still have a lot to offer, even if it's just wisdom and perspective. I think this current generation, man, they just want to be heard. They're lost, they're lonely, they got the whole internet thrown at them, all the good, bad, and mostly the ugly, and so, all the things that they got pushed kind of down their throat, man. I think as we come as this generation of men, in our 40 somethings, maybe, man, the best thing we have to offer is just like, hey, man, here's my brokenness. I offer my brokenness, and maybe you can learn something from it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's probably par for the course for every human being, is we all want to be heard.
Mm-hmm.
And we want to be heard either to be healed, or we just want to be heard to be recognized. We want to be heard to connect. And so giving that gift, and then probably being the brave one and opening up and doing things like we do and talk about our own wounds and talk about our own struggles to make it okay, so that we can actually open that door, so we can hear the younger generation, we can hear these young men. You look at the Mask We Live In, that documentary, you talk a lot about the same thing, where we put on these masks, we put on these faces. And so taking the mask off and saying, hey, I'm just a dude. I've got a father wound. This is what it taught me. This is what I learned from it. And this is what I can share with you as a young man coming up.
Yeah. And again, I think, that's kind of the lead into this whole, as we kind of lead into break, I think, that's kind of the lead into this whole thing of just like, man, we don't have answers, but we got experience. And sometimes experience is an answer, or sometimes experience is perspective. I don't know, but at the same time, to have these conversations, is crucially important, man, to recognize these things and to talk about them. So yeah, man. With that,
pause for the cause.
Pause for the cause. Mad Men of Masculinity, baby. 12:20 a.m.
on your radio,
on the radio dial, Mile High City and everywhere. Your home for a healthy masculinity. Boom!
And we're back. Mad Men of Masculinity on KLDC. No, I'm just kidding.
I didn't know we were back that quick. Are we back?
I'm just kidding. You snapped your fingers. I thought it'd be funny.
Oh. All right, we're not back
behind the scenes.
This is behind the scenes. If you're watching this, is what we do in between breaks. We take a sip of something. I was about to say we're back. Ooh, I'm not endorsing this, but man, this mango orange is delicious.
Pretty tasty. Hey, Body Armor, we are looking for sponsors. So.
Yeah, hey, absolutely, man. Feel free. We will endorse shameless plugs on here, man.
There's no shame here. No shame
watching this bad boy. And since we're on a break, if you're watching this bad boy, man,
like and share.
Come on. All it takes is for you to hit subscribe. To be totally honest, hitting subscribe, it helps us. It helps us so we can do this bad boy permanently. So we can, it helps us to monetize this bad boy. It helps us to get our legs under us and to
Yeah.
push our passion forward to the world.
It helps us help you. Like
Absolutely.
we get, the more likes and subscribes we get, the more people watching.
Yeah.
The more people watching, the more we get to do this for you. The more information we get to put out, the more we get to be.
And so we give you that hour-long right here on the behind-the-scenes version. We give you the hour-long to watch, and then we do the 30-minute joint, and then then we do over the air. So everything now that we're recording, she's actually going to edit this out for the over the air. You want to be able to see this bad boy.
Yeah, but, all this we're talking about between the whole break thing. Yeah,
you getting all of this. You getting all of this, like not even over there. This is behind the scenes right here, man.
We just went back to curtain.
Show
Never man that line behind the curtain. The man behind. What did I say? Come on.
Sure. Oh, Wizard of Oz.
Yeah.
Pay no attention to the man behind the
curtain. That's the one.
Yeah. Although super producer Nikki Nicole is the woman behind it.
That's right.
Not quite the curtain, but the glass
Nikki
window.
Nicole, super producer.
But anyhow.
Woman behind the glass. Yeah. All right, we ready? And we're back.
We're back.
Madmen of Masculinity on KLDC, 1220 AM on your radio dial. Your home
for healthy masculinity. Oh yeah. We love it. We love it. We love it. This is fantastic. We are here. We're talking about the father wound. We're talking about the father wound that by far way more than 51 out of 100, probably more than 91 out of 100 men in our culture have. In this Western culture, not the tribal culture where, in some places and parts of the world where, everybody grows up together and, everything is kind of traditional and set and all those kinds of things. Rite of passage exists, all these other kind of things. We're talking about in our Western culture, that father wound that most of us have, that very few of us talk about. That very few of us talk about, and if I can share, can I share? Can I get a little?
Absolutely, yeah. Because I want to share because I want to jump on that tribal thing like right both feet. So
I figured out, perspective anyway. So my dad was a Vietnam vet. He went to Vietnam after he got arrested. He said you can go to jail or you can go to Vietnam, and he ended up going into the Marine Corps and went to Vietnam. He spent his 18th birthday in Vietnam, and at some point he got 100% disabled. Came back from Vietnam, bounced around different parts of the country before he actually got out. And somewhere in there, he developed a raging drug and alcohol addiction. Anyhow, fast forward, met my mom. It turns out I have two older siblings that I just found out over the last few years. Met my mom, had me, and, growing, and my younger brother. And, growing up, I mean, we pretty much had like every form of abuse almost, possible in our home. And so I saw a lot of that kind of stuff, man. And there were times where he was there. When he was there was just a lot of chaos and a lot of the abuse and all those kinds of things. And then when he wasn't there, he actually at one point got convicted. He got convicted of assault of a particular kind that, will get demonetized if we actually say it on YouTube. But and he was sentenced to a mental hospital. And so growing up, it was kind of normal for him to go visit him on the weekends at St. Elizabeth's Mental Hospital in D.C. And so, yes, when he was gone, there was that. And then when he was home, there was that. And in between, I was always, trying to find out who he was or who I am through him. We happen to have almost the same name, same middle initial, but different middle name. And so that, and so I grew up around my friends in the neighborhood looking for some identity from my older friends. And so, that was whatever you can stitch together from that. That's kind of the emotional genetic makeup of my father wound anyway.
Right. Well, I mean, we went down that way for you, or you talked about it, so I'll talk about mine. And it's different. In some ways, I'm envious of your, upbringing because
wow, I've never heard that.
Well, and here's why, and I'll get into it, but because you had an actual here is why. You could look at your father and go, okay, now I know why, and you're aware. You can say, okay, my father was this way. I'm conscious of that. I don't want to go that direction. For me, it took me until my probably 30s before I figured out that I had, complex PTSD from neglect. And, my father did the best he could. His upbringing was, his father passed when he was 5 in a drunk driving accident. So he was raised by a single mother and 2 older sisters. And he was the youngest. And so, of course, his mother worked cutting hair. And then basically he was raised by his 2 older sisters who, their kids themselves, they're his, older sisters. They don't want to be the mother. So he grew up most of his life wishing he had just been born a girl so he could fit in. and he became very rebellious and whatnot. And they had me at 23. I think when I was 23, like, Lord, you know, having a child, I'm still a child, and so it was through that. He raised me the best he could, and he didn't feel like because he didn't have a father around his whole life that he had what it took to be a father. So he kind of adopted the social norms of stop crying, I'll give you something to cry about, or suck it up, all these different things. And so it wasn't until later on in my 30s when I look back and go, oh, I learned something through therapy and counseling is that neglect, especially emotional neglect, physical neglect, has a very big impact. And the worst part is because there's no real physical abuse or real overt mental abuse or whatnot. It's just this lacking. And so you develop all these different coping mechanisms, which I did. But because there was no overt trauma or abuse, I just was like, well, why am I struggling in life and relationships so much? It wasn't until somebody else, or through therapy or counseling or through personal development, finally was like, oh, okay, so neglect. And I remember doing the silly, I think it was on Facebook or something, the silly little, do you suffer from neglect? And clicking almost all of the things like, oh yeah, I have this, I have this, I have this. And now I'm going, okay. And so in some ways, I mean, none of us, everybody's trauma is their own, and nothing is better or worse or harder. I mean, everything's unique and personalized for each person. But I mean, for me, it was like something I wish I had overt abuse, so I could be like, oh, that's what it was.
Yeah.
I had to go back later on and go, okay, it was the lack of that caused my trauma.
And man, that's sometimes it's a question that can cause a wound, and sometimes it's the answer to a question that can cause a wound. Sometimes knowing the why, and sometimes not knowing the why. But in any case, we do, man. We have these experiences, and probably, like I said, man, there's probably very, very few men that don't have a story somewhere along those lines in terms of, okay, here's my father's story, man, and here's how that impacts us. And so, we as guys, if a lot of us think that we have a unique story or we have a unique wound, and in actuality, when we begin to share these things, when we begin to talk, when we begin to live, in context and in community with other men and open up these things, man, we realize that we're not alone. We realize that we've all been through a lot of the same stuff, and a lot of those same stuff shapes us to the way we are now. And we can deal with that stuff instead of trying to medicate those things, man, because quite often we try to medicate those things instead of dealing with those things.
Yeah, I mean, and that's why men's work and having a tribe and a pack is so important, because if we don't have a safe space, and I do mean safe space with other guys on the path to talk about these things, then you're going to go through your whole life either stuffing, medicating, numbing out, or just ignoring what could be your purpose, what could be your path, what could be your greatest strength. Because going through that process of healing, or going through that process of acknowledgement and talking through and realizing, number one, you're not alone. Number two, there's a lot more of us out there than we think. We're probably the majority. And having that experience of learning about yourself even more and where you come from, and then turning that into a strength. Because I can honestly say now, as much as I was very rebellious towards and mad at and had a lot of animosity towards my father, now, he's been gone 5 years now, or 7 years. Geez, 7? Wow. He's been gone 7 years now. And I cannot have this conversation with him in the physical. However, I know now that he was the best example for me, even though it was traumatizing and I dealt with complex PTSD and neglect and all those things. But it led me here. Led me to this moment right now on the radio, on YouTube with Kirk. Although had I not gone through that process, I would still be medicating. I would still be numbing out. I would still be denying what in reality is who I am.
And my father died 26 years ago. I was 23 years old. I just got married and was a few months away from becoming a father. And just got kind of the call out of the blue and I guess he just died, sitting in somebody's chair. And then it turns out that, he died at 46 years old. His father died at 46 years old. And then his father died like even before that. So, a lot of these things are passed down. A lot of these things are generational. And, I'm thankful, blessed to maybe past 49. At this point, I'm still kicking. I plan on doing another 49 before I begin to bring that thing in for a landing. And so, but a lot of these things, man, a lot of these things are huge, man. A lot of these things are big, big things to approach. And man, I wish I could have a conversation. Sometimes now I think back and when I do think about it, I'm like, man, and knowing his story, hearing his story, and knowing some of the things that he went through when he was young that I didn't know when I was younger, stuff that happened to him. Again, I can kind of like, man, bro, and I kind of wish that I could just, have these conversations, or have a conversation with him. But to have these conversations with, with other men is huge. And then in my case, having a son now, adopted son, having a son now. And he has his own kind of father wound from his biological family, and being able to relate to him just in terms of like, being there as a father. But then on top of that, like, yeah, man, I got some junk in my trunk too in terms of the father space, the father heart.
Yeah, I think you kind of touched on it, but I'm going to shine a light on it. But if you want to break that generational cycle, the sins of the father will be visited upon up into the seventh generation. Well, unless you acknowledge and heal that wound and break that cycle, that's what's going to happen. So doing this work, acknowledging a father wound, acknowledging that there's something you need to work on, and then sharing that with other men, you can break that cycle. If you don't like how you were raised, you don't like how you came up, you want to break that cycle and not pass that down. That's where it starts.
Yeah, and absolutely, man. First thing we got to do is acknowledge that thing, man. I mean, it almost kind of sounds like the stages of grief when I think about all the different things that you need to do. But, I mean, yeah, you got to acknowledge that thing. You got to accept that thing. And that's part of who you are. Like, that's part of your thing, right? I mean, shoot, Luke Skywalker had a father wound.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, so did Anakin, right? I mean, and so, I mean, you can go on and on and on. Every superhero has a sad backstory, right? So, I mean, you think about how many superheroes have a father wound in their origin story, right? So yeah, I mean, these kind of things, I think it starts with accepting it, and it starts with getting to the place where you can kind of sit with it. And this is kind of who I am, but it doesn't have to be who I'm going to be. I mean, I think, but I think being able to talk about these things, I think being able to address these things, I think thinking of, the whole idea of bringing this stuff up is hugely important, man.
Well, you can't find the collateral beauty in your trauma until you acknowledge it and look at it and unpack it. So speaking of unpacking, I think we better pause for the cause and get back to unpacking in a minute.
Hey, we are the Mad Men. We are broadcasting live, kind of live-ish. We are broadcasting. I mean, we're live. We're living when we're saying these words, so we're kind of live. But we are on KLDC 1220 AM in the Mile High City and online everywhere. Boom. Behind the scenes crowd, what y'all think, man? What y'all think? Give us some comments.
Yeah.
Put some comments down there. Behind the scenes, gang.
We'll answer your comments even after the fact.
Oh yeah, we'll definitely answer the bad boy. If you type some comments down there, we'll see the notes. We'll get them, and you agree, you disagree, that's cool too. If you think we, cray, if you think we on something, some wacky tobacco or something like that, or you think we, out to lunch, that's cool too. But if you're in the behind the scenes crowd, let us know, man. This stuff is deep, and this stuff it can get kind of somber and all that kind of stuff. But matter of fact, if you're watching this in the behind the scenes video of this thing, give us your origin story. Tell us in the comments what your story is. Give us a little bit of your background. Maybe somebody can see your story and think, wow, I'm not the only one. So if you're watching this, especially like I said, in the behind the scenes crowd, the deep version, our version, man, put a comment down and tell us your story.
Yeah. The more you share your story, the more you realize you're not alone, and there's a lot of people that will benefit from it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Segi 3. Ready?
Let's do it. And we're back.
We're back.
Masculinity on KLDC 1220 AM in the Mile High City. Your
home
for healthy masculinity.
Oh yeah.
Let's get back to unpacking.
Oh yeah, man. Next generation, man. Next generation, man. To be able to, to have that conversation with the next generation, man. To be able to open up and just sit with. I think a lot of fatherness is just sitting with.
Oh yeah.
Just being in the presence. I think we can get the message that just being there and showing up is not enough because somebody wants us to overperform and all that kind of stuff. And it ain't about performance, it's about presence. And the more I realize that, man, it's really just my presence that has the significance in the moment. The fact that you're there. I mean, I remember playing Little League, wishing that my father was present, in the stands or anything that I did, present. When I graduated, something present. And so now just realizing, like, next generation, man, it's just dope just to be present at stuff.
Yeah, I think we talked about that before on another one of the other episodes where, it seems to be, especially for fathers, that the moms and the wives have most of the influence up until probably puberty, especially for the boys. And then after puberty, then the fathers have a lot more influence. But really, it's not until after 18 and they get out in the world, that's all of a sudden when dad comes into his, gets his traction. Because if you've been present the whole time, you've held that masculine space and created some healthy, strong children. It's after they get out of the house that also you're like, oh, dad, what about this? Help me with that. And that's when you really come into your own. That's you're getting them into reality in the real world and helping them with the real things that you got to deal with.
Yeah, the mother's influence gets them through childhood. The father's influence gets them through life, and basically adulthood. And so, it's one of those things that, being there, all the little lessons, all of the examples, good or bad, that we demonstrate while we're there, even if we're not there, but that we demonstrate while we're there. That's the stuff that they carry on. All of those long-term scars and wounds and all that kind of stuff. I mean, those kind of things last into our adulthood, and those kind of things quite often, I think, come from those father wounds. But absolutely, I think, I think the ability or the desire to just be there, to be present in whatever kind of way you can be present. There's a reason why, a gift is called a present, because being there, just being present can be a gift to the next generation. So,
and you said something that struck a chord too, like as a father or as a male role model, please do not try to be perfect. Mm-hmm. Just be yourself, because our kids, I know I learned almost more from the mistakes and the things that I didn't. You learn a lot about what you don't want. And if they are your children, a lot of times your first generational children, they're going to be opposite of you. They're going to be different of you. It's rare that you have the one that's just like you. So be yourself as much as you can be. Be honorable and be authentic, but allow them to see all sides of you so they can choose for themselves and use those examples to decide. It's the contrast that we need of, I like this, I don't like that. It's the buffet of life. How do you know what you don't like if you don't try it or you don't see it? So, show everything you got so that they can go, hey, I like that part of that. Didn't like that part. I don't think we'll take that. You're still adding benefit, even if it's negative or unwanted or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah. I mean, I think obviously it probably goes without saying that maybe the worst you can do as a father is to be abusive, right? I mean, to literally scar and wound and all that kind of stuff.
Or not be there at all.
But I think secondly, like a really close second behind being abusive is being absent. Yeah. And I mean, I think, I think just the effort and just trying to be there and recognizing that, you know what, I'm going to be and do the best that I can and let that be enough. Yeah. But we can easily get sucked into this not enough, not good enough.
Well, we just went through that whole thing with your son. I mean, where you were getting just blasted by everybody. And it's like, no, you got to allow him to grow and go through his stuff. And it's not until after that he's going to come back and go, oh, thank you, allow me to make some mistakes and be in there as that catcher or that, the safe space. And so, I mean, you have that experience.
Yeah. And I think, again, as men, man, you got to be willing to weather that storm. As a dad, as a father, I mean, you got to be willing to weather that storm based on what you think is right, either from what you got or what you didn't get, but at the same time, there is a fatherly intuition, especially from from a good man that is doing and trying everything he can be there and be the best he can be. There is a fatherly intuition of what my child, or even, like, being more specific, my son needs in this moment. I think we can, like in my son's case, I can say, man, I am where you're going to be in 30 years in terms of age, in terms of, in 30 years, he's going to be a 49-year-old black male in America. Right. I mean, and he may or may not have kids, family, exes, all that kind of stuff. All that's superfluous in terms of, but at the same time, he's going to be a 49-year-old black male. Right. And so I can almost look at him and be like, man, 30 years ago, what would I tell myself? And what would I in this moment, what would I need based on looking at him and seeing him from an inside out in terms of boy to man?
I think that's a great point. And I want to jump back on the tribal thing because it struck a chord with me. And I think we're talking about father wounds. And, we talked about initially that probably 90% of men have some sort of father wound. I mean, Kirk talked about the 4 different categories of absenteeism, neglect, abuse, or being too good, setting too high a standard. And of those 4 examples, maybe 10% of men have a father who doesn't fit one of those 4 categories and actually had a good relationship. But with the absence of our culture and tribal societies and absence of even the community, when used to be the adults of childbearing age didn't necessarily raise the children, the elders did. And I think not having the larger families and that kind of tribal community, just unity, we didn't get a lot of the elder care. We didn't get a lot of the wisdom from the elders. And so we have young children, basically 20-something children, attempting to fill all the of wise elder and healthy masculine, healthy mother, all these different things that nowadays has just been stripped away from us. Now we have these nuclear families where you're a 20-something-year-old kid with now kids of your own. You're barely out of the house yourself. You don't know what you're doing with your life. How are you supposed to raise a small child and give them all the things you didn't get? And so I love the fact that I do see a big push and a lot of people talking about creating smaller communities and having unity in communities and bringing back a lot of the tribal traditions of community and using wise elders to help raise the children, and that all the children were children of the tribe. It wasn't just my kids and your kids. It was all our responsibility. And plus, having that support and having a community mindset. We're also separated now that, what do you see? I always see, don't tell me how to raise my kids. Well, I'm not trying to tell you how to raise your kids. I'm attempting to support you.
Yeah. We live in a time where information is abundant, but wisdom is scarce.
Yes.
And you can pull up a screen, type in a few words, and get any answer you want. As a matter of fact, we have devices now. All you got to do is literally say its name, ask it any question you can think of, and it will respond with whatever its source is for information to answer the question. How far is the moon away right now, et cetera, et cetera. But what we are lacking today is any kind of deep level of wisdom. And I think that's what when we had the elders raising the young, when we had 3 generations involved in a family, that's what that looked like, because it was wisdom being the center of knowledge, not information. I think when information is the center of knowledge, then that's a mile wide and an inch deep. And so that's the one thing that I think we do have to offer these days.
Yeah. I mean, information without experience is just data. Until you have the experience to know what's good information, what's bad information, what is appropriate for this. Because I mean, honestly, there's no good or bad necessarily, but what is appropriate in this moment without having the experience and the wisdom from making mistakes and going through those years. And so we have all these families of 2 young kids attempting to raise children. I mean, I'm in my mid 40s now I feel like I'm almost ready to raise children. Yeah. And now maybe I'm past that threshold. Luckily I'm a man, so
Which back in, you know, in certain cultures or whatever, you would be moving into the grandparent.
Yeah.
I mean, phase. And so that's kind of makes sense where now you're like, okay, I got some wisdom. Well, guess what? You know, your kids would be, you know, kind of tribally about to have their own kids, and you have the more patience, you have the depth, all those kinds of things to offer in that situation. So it kind of makes sense that, yeah, I agree. Be at this point. I'm almost thinking, man, if I waited this long to get married, man, my life would be a whole lot better. Because now I'm just like, I think I finally get some stuff. Like I finally get it.
It only took me 40 years. I'm starting to get this stuff.
But to be able to offer some kind of wisdom, like even to my son, of just, you know, and we just talked about this not too long ago, of just like, you know, man, you got in a fight, cool. You know, that's good. You know, okay. Did you get your butt whipped? Cool. That's good. You know,
did you die?
No. Cool. Right. I mean, it's the Friday method, you know, I mean, and you know, we told that.
I don't think that's good radio.
No, it's probably not good radio. But every time I come in the kitchen, you in the kitchen. I like pig feet. I like hog maw. But at the same time, you got that kind of, you know, that kind of figure in the house that can say, yeah, okay, you win some, you lose some, but you live to fight another day.
It reminds me, I had this brilliant idea. I think it was divinely guided. I have this idea of, so all of you out there who are looking for some place to put your, we're looking for angel investors for ideas, or you're looking for some place to put your money that will actually impact the society in a positive way. I thought of this idea of combining daycares and nursing homes, and basically creating that wisdom elder. Because I mean, instead of spending all this money for daycares to have young 20-somethings babysit your kids, and then instead of putting your parents away, the wise elders away, and lock them away in some nursing home, combining those two, so you give purpose to the elders, and they get to share their wisdom. And honestly, there's no better combination of people than small children and grandparents or elderly.
Yeah,
they just get along. They see eye to eye. They have the wisdom and the patience, and I think we could probably save a bunch of money and do a lot of good for both the elderly and our kids.
Yeah, man. I mean, those kind of ideas, yeah, man, that kind of stuff is great. And then kids love old people, I mean,
and they always got butterscotch and peppermints in their pocket, and they say funny things. They don't care.
And so, yeah, I mean, man, those kind of things. But that whole wisdom tipping point is good when you can actually, when you can actually be able to transfer that wisdom, and let that be the foundation for knowledge, as opposed to just, hey, Google, or whatever. Hey, Siri.
Yeah.
Oh, see my phone. See, my phone. Look, see, my phone's already answered me. See, I mean, dude. So, I mean, that's a prime example, right on cue. I mean, man, that's absolutely it in a nutshell.
Yeah, I think it's just a matter of looking outside the box. We've been so like, oh, this is just the way it is. Yeah. It wasn't all the time. It's only been this way for 40 or 50 years, and it's not really that long. I think we've had enough of this nuclear family, young parents raising children, to realize it doesn't go well. Yeah. And it might be time to reevaluate some of the tribal traditions in the old communities and the village mindset, and move back in that direction for not only our mental health, but the mental health of our kids, or our elderly, of the whole family and tribe. Yeah.
And so again, back to the whole notion of and when we come back from this next break, I got a pretty profound question.
I like those.
But yeah, all of these things that we learn, even through our scars, even through our wounds, all these things become wisdom that we can now pass down to the next generation, even if that passing down of the next generation is just being present and just sharing the fact that, yeah, I've been there too, and you're not the only one. But to just be there is huge. Speaking of being there, man, let's take a break, man. What do you think? Let's take a pizzalls for the kizzalls, man. Madmen of Masculinity, KLDC, 1220 AM, Mile High City, baby. We'll be right back.
I'll be back.
And I wish I'm looking in here. at first I saw like beauty in front of me. I saw a super producer, Nikki Nicole, and then right behind her comes Knucklehead, Jamie Daniel. Man, that
Lord.
dude, man. I mean, I love him, but man, you won't find a bigger Knucklehead anywhere. What's that? I can't hear you. What did you say?
Hey,
Black Elvis. Black Elvis.
Black
We're
Elvis.
gonna call him Belvis. We're gonna call him Belvis. Belvis. Belvis would fit him. Oh, Jamie's sticking his knucklehead up in here, man. Good stuff.
Jamie from Corner Cafe.
Yeah. Let me
get you a Schweik.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I set this one for 5:30 start, and it may start right in the middle of our fourth clock, but we shall see.
Come down a home stretch of this.
All right, ready? And we're back. Mad and Masculinity on KLDC, 12:20 a.m. in the Mile High City, your home for healthy masculinity. So you had a question. All right, clear your throat, clear your teeth.
How come every time I come in the kitchen, you in the kitchen?
Eat up all the food.
I got a question for you, man. As we talk about the father wound, then as we bring this thing kind of down the home stretch, anyway, maybe we start our initial descent into our destination. If you could sit down with your father and have a conversation, what would you tell him or ask him?
Ooh, that's a good question. I think I would probably just sit down and want to have a conversation man to man, because it's something that we didn't get much of a chance to do. There was we get stuck in these roles as father and son, and with my father, it was very important for him to be the father and kind of the hierarchical type, so he wanted to be above, and so it was hard to have these conversations. And then I, of course, like you get around your parents, and all of a sudden you're 12 years old again, even though you've been 40, have your own house and career and everything. And so I would love to have just a sit down conversation, and basically I think I would like to tell him everything I've learned, especially because of when he passed, and I hadn't had a lot of these revelations and a lot of this healing prior to that. So I think I would just like to sit down with him and be heard, and tell him what I've learned and how much I appreciate all the good he did, and even all the that he didn't do. Everything that he did and didn't do made me who I am today. So I think having that conversation and having him listen and hear that, which I guess is nice in a way, because he can hear that now without the ego and all those things in the way. But I don't get to have the joy and experience of having that face-to-face interaction. So same question back to you, sir.
I think first thing I would say is I would tell him, first thing I would tell him is I forgive you. First thing I would tell him is I forgive you. Like, and in that context, I could honestly look back and I can think about it from a bigger picture and say, man, had I been through everything he went through, I'd probably come out the same way he came out. Yeah. If I was in the same load of laundry, I'd probably come out the same exact way. And so first thing I would say is I forgive you. And then after that, I would just want to talk to him. I just want to, hear his story and, hear his heart. And, I wouldn't be sitting down with him. I wouldn't be sitting down with him now, like from a place of fear, like back when I was young and he was freaking huge. At this point, I'm probably the same size, literally physically, that he was, if not bigger. I don't know. But so it wouldn't be me sitting down from a place of fear. Right. It'd be me sitting down from a place of forgiveness and understanding. Like I would want to tell him I forgive him, point blank, full stop. But then after that, I would then want to try to understand him, give him an opportunity to tell me what his life was like, and tell me, what he was thinking or not thinking, or what he was up. But so I think I would sit down with him from a place of forgiveness and understanding, and I would absolutely, first and foremost say I forgive you, and then secondly, beyond that, man, just be like, hey, tell me your story, man. I want to hear you. I want to know you.
I think that's something we both really agree on, especially getting to this phase in our life and having our experiences, that getting past even just the father-son dynamic and just getting to know your father as a person and finding out who they were as a person, because we get so caught up in dad and son and that dynamic that you stop seeing them, or you can't. Mother and father is the name for God and all the lips and hearts of all children. That was true for us as everybody else. However, as you become an adult, you can see them as a person, and then if you get to know them as a person, who they really are, then you can actually come to respect them and love them in a whole different way. You're always going to love them as your parents that brought you into this world. However, you can love them and learn to love them from who they really are. You get to see, like, you get to have that understanding of, oh, he's a person, he's a man, he had these trials and tribulations. That's what made him. And for me, that's really something that has always helped. I've always been curious. My mother's a psychiatric nurse, and I've always had that mindset. I look at people and go, why are you that way? And I want to find that out. And doing this with our parents is huge. It's hugely healing. And I think it gives us to a whole nother level of understanding and awareness for ourselves.
And to be able to see them as humans, and especially as we get older, to realize, man, I'm flawed too, and and I got bones in my closet, I got junk in my trunk, kind of thing. And so to be able to see them as human, see our fathers as human, to see ourselves as fathers or father figures as human, and I think a lot of that, exactly what I just said, that I would sit down and have a conversation with my father. I have to also get to that place within myself, to reconcile that with myself. First of all, the forgiveness, give myself the grace, but then at the same time, try to my best to understand myself, to understand why I am the way that I am, and what I've been through, and my story, and all those other kind of things. And so I think part of that is not only the conversation with him as my father, but also getting to that same place with me as a father, almost on behalf of my son, because I have my own father journey, the same way I have a son journey. So,
well, I think this is a great opportunity to send out a little challenge, because there's no time like the present, especially if you're a young father and maybe you don't have the best relationship, or you are struggling with being a father. This is a great time to get to know who your father really is, get to learn his backstory, because it's going to teach you so much about yourself, and not only heal that relationship, but create a whole new relationship, and give you much more wisdom and guidance, and just awareness around, who do I want to be as a father? What do I want to pass down as a father to my son, to my daughter? And how do I want to affect this next generation, instead of just going through with whatever was passed down to you through that road? Like, this is just what I got. This is all I know. This is what I'm passing down. Well, that just extends this, what you got, on to the next generation, and so on and so on. So that's our challenge to you as men to men. If your father's still here, give him a call if you can. Maybe call mom first and learn some stuff about dad. If you don't quite have that relationship, that's helpful as well. But if he's here, take that challenge to heart and really get to know him as a person, because it will definitely help you as a man growing into your own self.
And I think that's a great point. Something you just dropped right in there is to find that real story, because a lot of times the story we hear about him is not him. A lot of times we hear one side of the story, and sometimes that story can come from a wounded mom, right? And so sometimes dad doesn't get the benefit of the doubt for stuff that he did or tried or whatever. A lot of times, kids get messages from broken places. They get distorted messages from broken speakers, right? So,
there's a lot of dads that got no benefit, just doubt. They just get, that's all they get, and that's knowing that your parents are just people, and that your mom's doing the best she can, and she's hurting, and maybe your dad's not as bad as she says. I've seen so many kids, they get that message, and later on they go find out the dad wasn't really as bad or anything like what mom said.
I can tell you for sure. I'll be totally honest. I can tell you for sure. I think that a couple of my kids, man, I know for a fact that they got a bum rap in terms of the story they heard about me. I guarantee they didn't hear all the stuff I did without boasting and all that kind of stuff. And so yeah, I think it's huge to go get that story. And that, again, that would be part of that whole sit down conversation. Tell me your story. Like, like I would want to hear it directly from him. I know what I saw, but what I saw was from a little kid's perspective, right? I didn't get the big picture. I know what I heard, kind of, although my mom was great in terms of, she never talked bad. I mean, all the negative impressions that I got was from things that I saw, not things that I heard. That being said, what I saw was from a little kid's perspective. But I think man, being able to get that side of the story, man, it's huge. It's gargantuan.
That'll be huge. I mean, you bring up a great point. Your memories are not factual. Most of your memories are fabricated at least 50 to 60% because as whatever you remembered, it's skewed by your perspective. Which if you're a child, that means you're taking things in without any sort of filter. You're just taking things in, and then usually you're egocentric as a child, so it's all your fault, or daddy doesn't love me because he's not here, or daddy doesn't love me because he's over there doing stuff, and you're not seeing it from a wider perspective of, well, dad's a human being and he's got these struggles and he's dealing with this PTSD and this and this. So, yeah, having those conversations and finding the real story and talking to him man to man and finding out who he is as a person will be so beneficial for both of you because I'm sure nobody's ever asked him, especially from the older generations. They don't get asked like, "How are you? Tell me your story. Who are you?" All that stuff. So it's a huge gift you can give yourself and them.
Yeah. And I think before we get out of here today, I think it's definitely worth saying, making sure we don't skip over the fact that even if you have a father wound, even if you have a sad backstory, even if you have some pain, some abuse, even if you have any of that kind of stuff in your story, in the ingredients to the recipe that makes up you, even if you have any of that, that still is absolutely zero excuse for you to not be something better that you want to be.
Amen.
That is not an excuse for you to completely abdicate your responsibility or your throne as a king, in the family or whatever it is, and to just say, nah, well, because this happened to me, well, now no, that is not an excuse at all. We are empowered to improve. The generational blessing goes farther than the generational curse. So even if you just pivot just a little bit, 1 or 2 degrees, that's Kaizen, small measurable change, but then you project that out over time, and generations from now, something will have happened in your being in the family tree that changed the trajectory of everything. So we absolutely have the power and the ability to own our story and to go a different direction, regardless of the cards we were dealt.
Yeah, and to that point, if you are over 18, and I would even say if you're over 12, but if you're over 18 to be legal, you're not a victim anymore. You are out of the house. It's up to you now to take what you were been given. And the easiest way I found, what worked for me, was to look back at my past and look at my parents and say, well, what if I chose them? What if as, a higher spiritual being, what if God and I sat down and went, well, what do you want to do? What do you want to learn this lifetime? What do you want to get out of this? Who would be the best people to teach you this? Right, wrong, good or bad, whether it's true or not, looking at your life through that point of choice and saying, what if I chose this? What did I gain out of this childhood? What did I learn? What were my traumas? What were my lessons? What were all these things? What if I chose those things? Because just shifting your perspective from, oh, this happened to me, I'm a victim, to what if I chose this? Now you can take your power back and go, okay, I'm going to live my life from now on through a point of choice and look at these things as something I chose. Because whether you chose them or not, whether you want to believe it or not, they made you who you are now. And if you don't want to go, okay, here's who I am now, here's where I want to go, it's up to you. You're no longer a victim. It's time to put on the big boy pants and grab the shovel and get digging.
And this is why we're here. This is why we do this, from a sense of empowerment, not a sense of victimhood or a sense of what could be, not about being bitter about your past, or being bitter about your ex, or being bitter about women, or being bitter about your father or your mother. This is about, when I talk about this, I'm talking about Mad Men and Masculinity. These conversations are about empowerment of where we are, who we are now, and how to take that forward and be the best man that we can be, to be the best that we can, to offer the best that we can offer, to the world around us, and to those people around us.
And you can't be the best of anything if you're still holding on to your past. You're still carrying around that luggage. It's time to unpack it, set it on fire, what you don't set on fire, and leave that past behind you and start from where you are now. Where do you want to go, and live through a point of choice and purpose?
Because if you don't unpack your baggage, it becomes luggage, and you take it with you everywhere you go, including on an airplane. Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking.
Hey, Captain, what's happening?
I want to thank you for flying on Mad Men Radio today, and I just want to let you know that we're lining up on runway 18 left, And we're going to bring this thing in for a nice smooth landing. It might be a few bumps,
It'll
but
be smooth this time.
we're going to bring this thing in for a nice smooth landing. Today we'll be pulling into gate A12, and your
Bingo.
luggage that you're going to unpack is going to be on carousel 3. Thank you for flying with us, and we'll see you next time.
Have a great day.
So,
man.
JBK, man, just real quick, man, super quick, man. What's your walk away from this one?
Walk away. Man, how can I nutshell this? Let's do it like this. You're not a victim of your father. Your father's just a man. No matter what the trauma is, what the abuse is, you can heal it. You can turn it into a strength and a superpower. How about you, sir?
I would say, man, forgive your father first and foremost, and forgive yourself for any kind of father shortcomings you've had. Learn to, if you can, try your best to understand your father and try best to understand yourself, man. Give grace and just understand that you're a work in progress. He probably is or was or whatever. If he's still alive, he'd probably be different than he was back then, all those kinds of things. And so use it as a launching pad, as a place to launch from and to send your rocket into orbit that you want to go, as opposed to sending it to the depths of the ocean where you don't want to be.
Yeah, you're no longer a victim in this life. If you're out of the house, it's time for you to take charge, take responsibility. And we're here for you. You can find us on madmenradio.com coming soon. You can find us on our website. You can find us on YouTube, Facebook, and, of course, Saturdays at 8 a.m. right here on KLDC, 1220 a.m. in Mile High City, with a replay Wednesday night at 6.
Boom.
Love y'all. Have a great day.
Mad Men out.